I never really spent much time pondering God, at least not in any serious way. I did believe in something, some higher force, maybe fate or just the vast universe. But organized religion, that was never my scene. It always felt like a heavy load, a set of old rules, meant to control us and strip away life's fun. My parents weren't into it, and neither were my friends, so it rarely came up. Whenever someone brought up faith, I'd just smile, nod, and switch the topic. It wasn't that I was opposed to the idea. I simply wasn't invested. At 20, I felt like the world was wide open. My days were a mix of college classes, endless scrolling through social media, hanging out with friends, and chasing whatever felt good at the moment. My plan was simple. Finish school, have a blast, and worry about everything else later. Thinking about death, eternity, or what might lie beyond seemed pointless. Life was too short to spend time fretting over something unseen and unproven. That doesn't mean the thought never crossed my mind, but whenever it did, I'd shove it aside. In quiet moments, lying in bed at night, or gazing out the window on a long drive, I'd sometimes feel a strange emptiness, a hollow spot deep inside, like something essential was missing, even if I couldn't figure out what. Maybe it was just stress, or maybe I needed a distraction. So I'd turn up the music, check my phone, text a friend, anything to drown out that persistent nagging feeling. I wasn't unhappy. I had amazing friends, solid grades, and the freedom to do what I wanted. If anyone had asked if I felt fulfilled, I'd have laughed. Who cares about fulfillment? I was young, I was living. That was all that mattered. Then everything changed on one seemingly ordinary afternoon. It was supposed to be a regular day, sun shining, streets buzzing, and I was walking with my best friend, laughing about some trivial joke. We were crossing the street in the middle of our conversation when I suddenly heard it. A blaring horn. Screams followed. There was a violent impact, and then everything went black. Moments before, laughter had filled the air as Emily, my best friend, and I stepped onto the crosswalk. It had been one of those effortless afternoons where time didn't matter. You just wandered and talked without a care. Emily had just cracked some ridiculous joke. I can't even recall exactly what. But it had me laughing, head thrown back in amusement. Then I heard it again, a deafening horn, and the world seemed to slow down. Emily's eyes widened, her mouth agape, but I couldn't make out her words over the roaring sound of an approaching truck. More screams, more chaos. There were shouts, tires screeching, and a sickening crunch as metal collided with pavement. Then came the impact. At first, I felt nothing, just a sudden force, as if I'd been yanked from the ground. For a brief moment, I was weightless before something slammed into me. My vision blurred as I was flung backward, spinning, with the sky and buildings merging into a chaotic blur. And then, nothing. For a moment I thought I had blacked out. But then, I saw her, Emily. She was on her knees in the middle of the street, screaming my name, her hands clutching something, my body. I lay motionless on the asphalt, limbs bent at unnatural angles, blood spreading beneath my head. My eyes were open but vacant. A wave of confusion hit me. No, that couldn't be me. I was standing, wasn't I? I tried to step forward, but my legs wouldn't move. I tried to call out, but no sound came. Panic surged through me. What's happening? People rushed toward the scene, faces twisted in shock. Someone pulled out a phone. Calling for help, probably. A man knelt beside my body, pressed his fingers to my neck, and shook his head. I felt nothing. No heartbeat. No breath. No weight. And then it hit me. I was dead. Terror crashed over me. I tried to run back, to force myself inside my body, to make it move, but I had no control. I was watching, yet I wasn't there. Then something yanked me backward. An invisible force, cold, suffocating, ripped me from the scene. The street, the crowd, Emily. They blurred into the distance. I wasn't rising. I wasn't heading towards some bright light. I was being pulled down into something vast, something endless, something dark. I was falling, not through air, not through space, just falling. There was no wind, no gravity, only an unrelenting pull, dragging me deeper into nothingness. The world I knew was gone. No lights, no sounds, only blackness. At first, I thought I had gone blind, but no, this wasn't just the absence of light. This darkness was alive. It wasn't empty. It was aware of me, surrounding me, consuming me. Then the voices came. Whispers. Soft at first, like wind rustling through dead trees. Then louder, overlapping, speaking words I couldn't understand. Some were almost soothing, a cruel imitation of a lullaby. Others hissed and spat, their tones sharp, mocking. And then they said, my name. Annabelle. The sound slithered through the void, stretching, twisting, wrong, inhuman. The whispers laughed, a choked, distorted cackle that sent ice through my veins. I tried to move, but I had no body, no hands to reach out with, no legs to run. I was simply there, adrift in an endless sea of darkness with no surface and no escape. A deep, penetrating cold seeped into me, not the shallow chill of winter on bare skin, but something that crept inside, wrapping around every remnant of who I was. It wasn't just a cold feeling. It was pure emptiness. A void determined to engulf me completely. Then I sensed it. Something was watching me. Not from afar, but right there, inches away. I couldn't see it, but its presence was undeniable. So overpowering that every part of me felt ready to collapse inward. It wasn't human. It was beyond anything I could understand. And it wanted me. The shadows around me began to stir, initially flickering at the edge of my awareness. Soon, they coalesced into twisting, writhing shapes that shifted like living smoke. They had no faces, yet I knew they were watching, closing in. The murmurs grew into screams, voices not my own, but those of countless others. Dozens, even hundreds, overlapping cries of agony. Some sounded desperate, pleading. Others were so broken by suffering that they were nothing more than raw, endless despair. I wasn't meant to be here. This wasn't right. I fought against the darkness, trying to push back, but there was nothing to hold on to. I was utterly helpless, completely at the mercy of whatever waited in that abyss. Then the shadows lunged. A monstrous force surged toward me, an ancient, wrong presence that made my very soul recoil in terror. I couldn't make out its form, only that it was vast, powerful, and ravenous. It had been waiting for me. It had always been waiting for me. I tried to scream, but no sound emerged. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go as the darkness closed in around me. Then came a single word. Stop. It shattered the abyss. The darkness recoiled, shrinking back like a wounded animal. The whispers fell silent, and the monstrous presence that had nearly swallowed me retreated, as if scorched by something far greater. And then, suddenly, there was light. The darkness pulled away, as a brilliant beam pierced through the void. It wasn't just brightness, it was pure power. The shadows flinched, and the voices vanished. For the first time since leaving my body, I felt something other than fear. I was being pulled upward. Though no wind or force was visible, I watched the crushing emptiness that had surrounded me dissolve, and in an instant, I was somewhere else. An indescribable place where there was no ground, no sky, just an endless, overwhelming glow, soft and pure, not harsh like the sun, as if I were immersed in a living light. This illumination didn't merely light the space around me, it cut right through me, leaving every part of me exposed as if I'd become entirely transparent. Then I saw him, a figure standing before me, more vivid and tangible than anything I'd ever encountered. Jesus. No introduction was needed. There were no doubts, no hesitations. His presence defied every expectation. There was no halo, no gentle radiance or clouds beneath him. Instead, he exuded raw power, a force of authority and love that burned like a living flame. Yet even in that majestic display, his eyes held deep sorrow. Not anger or judgment, just an overwhelming sadness. I was immobilized, unable to speak or move as the terrifying realization set in. He saw everything, every thought, every decision, every moment of my life laid bare. There was no place to hide, no excuse to offer. Then it began. I didn't merely see my past, I relived it. Every memory unfolded around me like a sweeping, all-encompassing film. I saw my childhood self, curious yet distracted, always feeling something was missing, but never questioning why. I saw my teenage years, the times I laughed at mentions of God, the eye rolls that greeted any talk of faith. I remembered every attempt someone made to share the truth with me, the friend inviting me to church, the stranger offering a Bible, those late-night moments when I wondered if there might be something more. But I had ignored them all. I witnessed every lie I told, every selfish act, every moment I chose my own way over that quiet, persistent whisper inside me. And the worst part wasn't just seeing my actions, it was feeling them, every careless word, every unkind deed. I felt the pain I inflicted, the hurt I dismissed as insignificant. It was all real, more real than I'd ever imagined. Then came the lost opportunities, the moments when I could have chosen differently, when I might have asked, listened, or turned away from the forces leading me astray. But I didn't. The truth hit me like a crushing weight. I'd been given countless chances, and I had refused to see them. I looked to Jesus, desperate for an explanation, for any sign of understanding, yet he already knew my every thought before I could even voice them. His voice wasn't booming like thunder or blazing like fire. It was calm, imbued with the weight of eternity. You were never meant to be in the darkness. Those words pierced me, shattering every illusion I'd clung to. But you chose the darkness. My soul trembled, not because you were evil or that you despised me, but because you turned away from the truth when it was offered. Tears streamed down even though I wasn't sure I still had a face. You lived as if nothing mattered, as if there were always more moments to spare, as if you could simply set me aside until it was convenient. And his tone wasn't one of anger. That was the cruelest part. Had he been furious, perhaps I could have argued, defended myself, but he wasn't condemning me. He was speaking the truth. I'd spent my life believing I could handle everything on my own, that faith was unnecessary, and I had endless time. I was wrong. Then, without warning, the light around us shifted. The comforting warmth of his presence faded, and something terrible emerged. The world transformed, no longer as I knew it. The sky turned black, dense with an unsettling presence. Even the air seemed contaminated, heavy and choking. In the distance, fires raged while people raced through the streets in panic. I noticed shifting shadows moving among them, yet they didn't cower. They roamed freely, their forms contorting and twisting, and the most disturbing part, the people didn't flee, they followed as if entranced, completely unaware of the unfolding horror. The terror was palpable, though no one grasped what was coming. Then I heard his voice again. "This is what awaits." I turned to him, my heart pounding, if I still even had one. "They won't notice until it's too late." His words settled over me like a heavy weight. I watched as people laughed, danced, and carried on with their lives, oblivious to the darkening world around them. I saw some try to escape, but it was already too late. Then I saw them, a massive radiant gate of light standing at the chaos's edge. I recognized it instantly. Heaven. Desperate souls ran toward it, crying out and begging to be let in. But just as they neared, they were forcefully pulled back, their screams and pleas echoing in the turmoil. I saw their faces, some who had called themselves believers, who had uttered Jesus' name, yet never truly known him. They believed they were safe, but they weren't. They'd waited far too long. I looked to Jesus, my entire being trembling. "Why are you showing me this?" His eyes met mine. "Because time is running out." With that, the vision shifted once more, and I began falling again. Before me the world unfolded in a way that was utterly alien. The sky was not simply dark, it was a dense, toxic void, as if the heavens themselves had been choked. A deep, eerie red glow pulsed behind the clouds, flickering like the last embers of a dying fire. The air pressed down on me, filling my chest with a raw, unyielding dread. For a moment, I thought I recognized my surroundings, but something was profoundly wrong. People wandered the streets with empty eyes, moving aimlessly, their faces void of emotion. There was no urgency, no panic, only a disconcerting calm, as if they were sleepwalking toward their doom. Then I saw them. Shadows, dark figures taller than any human, their forms twisting in unnatural ways as they moved among the crowd. These were no hallucinations or mere tricks of the light. They were demons. And yet, no one reacted. People didn't run, fight, or even scream. Instead, they welcomed the dark figures. Some smiled as a shadow caressed their hand like a lover's touch. Others laughed as if greeting an old friend. A woman extended her hand, letting a shadow coil around her wrist. A man knelt with bowed head, surrendering himself willingly. They didn't see the horror unfolding, or worse, they simply didn't care. I turned to Jesus, my body trembling with fear. "Why aren't they running?" he asked, his tone heavy with sorrow. "Because they can't see." I stood in horror as people trudged deeper into the darkness, vanishing into the abyss without a second thought. They believed they were safe, but they weren't. Then far off I saw a gate of light, brilliant, radiant, and pulsating with life. It wasn't merely a destination, it was the embodiment of peace, a force so powerful and pure that even from afar I yearned for it with every part of my being. Crowds rushed toward it, crying out and pleading. Some stretched their hands in desperate hope, repeatedly shouting, "Jesus, Lord, please let me in!" Yet the gate remained sealed. I watched horrified as an unseen power yanked them back at the very last moment, their screams slicing through the air, while their faces contorted in utter despair. "I knew you. I believed in you," one man sobbed. But Jesus' voice was steady and laden with a sorrow deeper than anything I'd ever known. "They knew my name, but they never truly followed me," he said, and his words shattered me. These weren't souls who had never heard the truth. These were people who thought they were saved, convinced they were destined for heaven. Yet they had never truly surrendered their hearts to him. They had lived as if there were always more tomorrows to make things right with God. But now, there was no more time. Then something else appeared before us, a massive book, suspended in the midst of the light, its pages ablaze with a golden fire. I knew instantly what it was. Even before Jesus could speak, it was clear. The Book of Life, with names inscribed in flickering flames. As the pages turned by themselves, I noticed something chilling. Some names were missing, vanished in an instant, as if they had never been written at all. "These are those who once followed me, but turned away," Jesus said. I stared at the empty spaces, my soul trembling. I thought of everyone I'd ever known, friends, family, classmates, people who once talked about faith but eventually drifted away. They had let the world pull them back, and now their names were erased. I wanted to scream, to demand an answer, yet deep down I already understood. It wasn't that God had abandoned them. They had abandoned him. Then the ground beneath us shook. An overwhelming presence emerged beside Jesus, so powerful that I dropped to my knees without a thought. It was a being of light and fire, with wings that shimmered like molten gold, and a voice that resonated deep within my soul. An angel. He raised his hand, and his voice thundered across eternity. The time is near, judgment is coming. Many will be lost. The weight of his words crushed me. Many will be lost. I looked at Jesus, my heart breaking. Most of them don't even notice, do they? He said, locking eyes with me. In those eyes, I saw deep pain, sorrow. No, he murmured softly. They're too caught up in their own lives to see what's coming. I thought about my own life. How many times had I ignored the truth? How often had I brushed aside that nagging feeling that something was missing? How many people had I ridiculed or dismissed for their faith, treating it like nothing more than a fairy tale? I had been just as blind as they were. And now I see it. They still have a chance, don't they? I whispered. Jesus simply nodded. As long as there's life, there's hope. Yet hope was fading. Time was running out. The vision began to dissolve, the world around me slipping away like mist carried by the wind. You must tell them, Jesus said, his voice a mix of command and desperate plea. Tell them before it's too late! And then I woke up. A violent force yanked me back. The radiant vision of Jesus, the angel, the book of life, all of it vanished in a rush, as if I were ripped out of a dream. The burning sky, the oblivious masses, the anguished cries of the rejected, everything blurred until it was gone. I felt myself plummeting faster and faster until I gasped as my chest heaved, desperately pulling in air like I'd been drowning. My body jerked suddenly, and then pain, a sharp, crushing agony in my ribs, lungs, and head. I was alive. Amid the chaos, voices shouted in confusion while machines beeped frantically. My vision was fuzzy. The world around me was a jumble of movement and sound. She's back! Someone cried out. I struggled to focus. I realized I was lying in a hospital bed, tubes attached to my arms, my body trembling with shock. Tears streamed down my mother's face as she gripped my hand, whispering, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" My father stood nearby, pale and shaken, as if he had seen a ghost. Doctors hovered over me, their expressions a mix of relief and disbelief, one of them repeatedly glancing at the monitor and shaking his head. She was gone. 3 full minutes. 3 minutes that stretched on like an eternity. I realized I was no longer the same person who had stepped onto that crosswalk. Something deep inside me had shifted forever. I longed to speak, to reveal everything I'd seen. But how could I? How do you explain heaven, hell, and judgment in a world that refuses to believe? How do you describe a darkness that moves and breathes? How do you convey the crushing weight of Jesus' gaze, the knowledge that your entire life has been exposed before him? I opened my mouth, but the words simply wouldn't come out. I saw it all. I tried to speak, but my voice shattered under the weight of it. I couldn't force the truth out. In the days that followed, I kept trying, though at first my parents assumed I was just confused, disoriented by the trauma. The doctors dismissed my visions as oxygen deprivation, hallucinations from a dying brain. But I knew what I experienced wasn't a dream or an illusion. I had been there, and I returned with a warning. That's when the strange things began. At night, I'd wake up paralyzed, my mind alert while my body remained completely still. I felt a presence in the room, something watching me. Shadows shifted in the corners, and whispers slithered through the air. At first, I thought it was all in my head, but one night, an unseen, heavy force pressed down on my chest. It was as if something was trying to silence me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. Panic seized me as the darkness wrapped around me like a living thing. And then, from deep within, I managed to force out a single word: Jesus. Instantly, the oppressive presence vanished. The pressure lifted, the air cleared, and the darkness retreated. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about my own experience. Something or someone didn't want me to speak out, to share what I'd witnessed, but I refused to be silenced. I began telling people what had happened. Some listened, some didn't. Some even laughed, dismissing it as a near-death delusion, while others insisted I was simply dreaming. You were out cold, just your brain, really. Yet a few of you truly listened. They approached me quietly, voices trembling with fear, asking, "What did you see? What should I do?" I could see it in their eyes. They felt it, even if they tried to hide behind logic and skepticism. Something inside them knew I was speaking the truth. That's when I realized my mission wasn't to win debates or silence arguments, but to warn, to speak up, no matter the cost. I had witnessed what was coming, and most people won't get a second chance. If you're reading this now, please don't brush it off. This isn't just another story or some online testimony to scroll past and forget. I was granted a glimpse of eternity, shown what lies ahead. Today, the world is distracted by social media, money, success, and fleeting pleasures. But time is running out. When the door finally closes, it'll be too late. Jesus isn't merely a figure from history, he is real, and so are hell and judgment. People often assume they have endless time. They think, I'll make things right with God later. I'll worry about eternity when I'm older. But believe me, later is not promised. When I stood before him, there were no excuses, no second chances. The only thing that mattered was whether I had truly known him. I was given a second chance, but most will not be. So I ask you, will you ignore this warning as I once did, or will you wake up before it's too late?